We've got Alan Elsner from J Street on the line to talk about this. Hi, Alan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So J Street is in the trenches here. We're going to spend $5 million, but you're outgunned. AIPAC and other groups are going to spend $20 to $40 million. How do you stop that onslaught to get your message out?
Well, we believe we have enough money to get our message out. Obviously, there is a huge onslaught on the other side, but we have a few things in our favor. First of all, we have the facts in our favor. This is a good deal for the United States, for the world, and for Israel. Secondly, we have a majority of Americans and American Jews who are supporting this deal, and our polling shows that majority is not slipping as a result of the other side's onslaught. And the third thing I think we have is that we have the president out there making the case and using the bully pulpit. And so I think that although the votes are going to be close, and the Republicans obviously control both houses of Congress, so they will vote to disapprove of this agreement, but then the president will veto it, and then the real fight is on the veto override. We think it's going to be close and tight, but we still feel pretty comfortable that we're going to win.
Yeah, the president needs 34 senators or 146 House members to sustain a veto. I think the biggest problem we face, and I support your group and your organization, is the media keeps portraying the other side as pro-Israel. So they put anybody on the defensive, when in fact, I don't think their position is necessarily pro-Israel. They might think it is, but here's a headline from the New York Times. Fears of lasting rift as Obama battles pro-Israel group in Iran. Well, as far as I'm concerned, J Street is pro-Israel. How do you battle that? The media that puts you behind the eight ball because they keep saying that conservative interests are pro-Israel.
Yeah, it's a problem. One thing we're doing is we're bringing Israeli former military officials and very high officials in the security services over to the United States to talk to some of these senators and members of the House and to send them around the country. So, for instance, we've got the former head of the Shin Bet and the former commander of the Israeli Navy, who's a decorated war hero, a guy called Ami Ayalon, and we're bringing him next week. We're taking him to Colorado, and he'll be meeting with Senator Bennett, who's a swing vote. We're bringing him to Washington, D.C. We're taking him to Delaware, where Senator Coons is a swing vote. We're taking him to Philadelphia. So, and we have a whole series of officials like that, and that kind of stature, coming over and saying, look, not all Israelis are echoing Benjamin Netanyahu in opposing this deal. And in fact, some of the most serious and senior and experienced military experts are supporting the deal, and a growing number of them. So that's one thing that we're doing. But you have to remember that J Street is just a relatively new organization. We're only 7 years old. AIPAC has been around for decades. Their budget dwarfs ours. But if J Street had not existed, there would be no campaign in the American Jewish community. There would be no pushback. So we think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
just let me just say, that with the announcements from both of the Minnesota senators and Senator Tester as well of New Jersey in favor of the deal, now we have a clear majority of Jewish members of the U.S. Senate who are supporting the deal. And so although you were right to say that Schumer is against it, and that was a serious decision that he made, and he'll have to explain to his colleagues when he wants to become the Senate Majority Leader next session how he did that, how he goes against the president. But we have a majority of Jewish senators in favor of this deal.
And this is how Fox's Eric Bolling said what he said. He said Jewish Democrats favoring the Iran deal chose democratic ideology over their consciences. Let's listen to that clip 9.
Boxer, Feinstein, Schatz from Hawaii. The list of Jewish senators who have come out in favor of this thing, believe me, will dwarf.
Well, maybe they didn't vote with their conscience. Maybe they didn't use their conscience before they voted. Maybe they voted along a democratic ideology instead.
How do you answer that ridiculous charge?
Well, it is absolutely absurd, offensive charge to imagine that people are doing this against their conscience just to support the president. Absolutely ridiculous. I would actually say that the opposite is the case, that a lot of people on the other side, if they thought to stop to think about it rationally, would support the deal. But, with the Republicans, as Obama said himself, if he said that the world was round, they would put in a resolution saying that the world was flat. They oppose everything that he does, so you can kind of write off the Republicans. And, a lot of the organizations feel that they have no choice but to march in lockstep with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, because that's what they do. That's what they've always done. And it takes a new organization like J Street to say, look, we can be pro-Israel. We love Israel just as much as you guys do. I personally served in the Israeli military, so I'm not taking any lectures from anyone else about what it means to be pro-Israel. But being pro-Israel doesn't mean that you have to support blindly everything that the Israeli government does. You don't have to support the settlements. You don't have to support the occupation. And you don't have to, join this jihad against what is a very good deal for the whole world and for Israel, because it blocks Iran's path to a nuclear weapon.
Absolutely. And your organization is putting a letter out there. You put a letter, open letter with 120 philanthropists and activists and other officials. Talk about that, what you're trying to do with this letter and what it says.
Well, we put a whole bunch of different letters out from different groups, basically making the case for the agreement. And we're also helping rabbis who want to write op-eds in favor of the agreement, sending them into newspapers. So, it's a question of organizing the majority that is there and making their voices heard. I just want to say that AIPAC is organizing so-called town hall meetings around the country, but they're really a stifling debate. At one of the town hall meetings that took place this week in Brooklyn, some of our guys went along with signs in support of the agreement. They didn't say anything. They stood at the back of the room politely and held their signs. And what happened? Their signs were ripped down and they were escorted out of the room, which is a clear violation of their First Amendment rights. And it shows that the other side is not interested in a debate. What they're trying to do is create an echo chamber to kind of magnify and amplify their voices and drown out the voices of the majority. So our job is really to combat that and to give a vehicle for the majority to be heard.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even the White House chief of staff, he went and made a presentation to AIPAC, and he was barred from taking questions. And that's the White House chief of staff. And this really upset Obama, who believed that they were, in fact, stifling free speech and it was disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate the way this debate has unfolded. We want to have a debate on the issues. We want people to look at the agreement and then to examine it on its merits and make up their minds. But what's actually happening is that the other side is really, and to some extent, some extremists on the side in support of the agreement are choosing to demonize and shoot the messenger. So we totally condemn the people who have put out statements suggesting that Senator Schumer is a traitor. We don't question Senator Schumer's patriotism. We think he's wrong on the issue, but he has a right to his opinion and to his decision. On the other hand, there's been this kind of wave of invective and incitement against the President of the United States and those of us who support the agreement, comparing it to the Munich Agreement of 1938. In the case of Huckabee, in an absolutely outrageous statement, he talked about bringing Israel to the gas chambers again and to the ovens of Auschwitz again, and so I feel that that's just a sign of weakness. Instead of looking at the agreement and debating it on its merits, they just try to demonize and shoot the messenger, and the result is that real kind of divisions and fissures and wounds and hurts are developing in our country, which are going to be hard to repair once this debate is over.
And you mentioned Huckabee. It seems that this presidential race, but on the Republican side, is making this a lot more difficult because they're all competing with Donald Trump to say the most outrageous thing imaginable, which helped lead to Huckabee's comments.
Yeah, I heard your previous segment when I was waiting to come on, and I just have to agree that there's a complete lack of responsibility. And what people say in their presidential campaigns does count, does come back to haunt them if, God forbid, one of these bozos is elected president. I remember in 1992 when I was a Reuters correspondent and covering Clinton. Clinton said some things about China, said some things about Bosnia that really hampered him once he became president, although nothing he said was anything like as ridiculous and outrageous as what these people are saying.
Yeah, and 29 of America's leading nuclear scientists and arms experts also wrote an open letter and thought this was the best deal possible right now, and thought this was the way to go, and are in support of this agreement. So the it seems the experts generally support this deal, and then you have some of these people on the other side that are just flame-throwing and trying to get attention for their presidential bid. Or, I mean, some of them are sincere and they believe this, but I just think they're not operating off of the facts. So Nicholas Kristof, they had a great column in the New York Times, and this is what he said about it. He said, quote, "It would be a catastrophe for American influence in the world if Congress killed the Iranian nuclear deal." Then he went on to say, then he went on to say that it's tragic that killing this deal would infuriate many allies, isolate America rather than Iran, and ultimately increase the risk of the Ayatollahs with nuclear weapons. I agree with this assessment. I also wonder what the alternative is. I don't really see any logical, coherent alternatives from those who are against this deal. They say they don't want war, but I mean, what do they really want?
Your guess is as good as mine, Wayne. I mean, I completely agree with what Kristof wrote. And if this deal is repudiated by the Congress, I think that the president's credibility in the world will be gravely damaged, because it will be shown that he can't control foreign policy. We elect a president to run our foreign policy and to be our commander-in-chief. What we have now is the Prime Minister of Israel coming into the Congress in March and basically giving a message that I don't agree with the president's foreign policy and I want to substitute my foreign policy, as if he was the senator from West Jerusalem, the Republican senator from West Jerusalem. So this is apart from the deal itself, the ramifications of the Congress voting against it are rather huge. And I believe that the Israelis, I understand. I just spent 2 weeks in Israel, and I understand that they are scared of Iran, that they find the Iranians to be very menacing, that the Iranians vow to destroy Israel and deny the Holocaust, and they have a powerful army, and they're meddling all over the region, and they arm Hezbollah, which has 80,000 rockets pointed at Israel, and I get all of that. And I also get that Israel would rather have Iran kind of permanently under sanctions and locked up in a bottle. But the point of the sanctions was to get to a negotiation, to get to an agreement. And they worked. We have the agreement. Whatever threat the Iranians pose to Israel will be infinitely worse if they have a nuclear weapon and if their proxies have a nuclear umbrella to shelter under. And this agreement prevents that. So whatever threats the Iranians pose, and they are real threats, the Israelis, with our help and the help of other allies, have to figure out ways of meeting those threats. But they are all meetable. They are all solvable. But if the Iranians were to develop a nuclear weapon, then you'd be in a different world, and that would be much worse. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Alan Elsner, Vice President of Communications with J Street. Keep on the good fight and win this. We need this. The world needs this. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. This is the Wayne Besen Show. I'll be back in a moment. I'll take a couple calls, 773-763-9278. See you in a second.